I've been looking forward to this conversation for weeks now. I suppose we can just go ahead and jump right in. I am curious. I know that one intention that I have for this conversation is to make sure that we all leave understanding your methodology around up-level communication, or you want to kind of like just weave that in. But I think to get us started, I'm just going to kind of cut right to the chase here, which is we're in the midst of a big year for a lot of different reasons. And it feels like the needle has moved more in the last 6 months in terms of racial bias and outcomes in policing specifically, more than it has almost in the past 20 years. But one of the things that stood out to me the most about these conflicts we're seeing this year are the differences around language, and specifically how that shows up in white fragility, but also across the spectrum, these questions of Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, and the strong reactions that people have to phrases like defund the police. I'd really love to start out just by asking you, what role do you think that language plays in both racial trauma from the past as well as ongoing racial conflict that we're seeing today?
Oh my goodness, I think language plays a humongous role. But the biggest thing that I see in Western culture is that when people speak, we aren't asking who is speaking, which part of the self is speaking. It seems that Western culture has had a hard time delineating between forces that I call the ego, the animal, and the higher self. So when I look at language and the way we speak, for instance, at a rally, I didn't attend any of the rallies downtown here in Asheville or any Black Lives Matter rally for that note, because it's a challenge to go and protest and not know who is protesting. You understand? Because me, for instance, being a Black woman from Detroit, raised in Michigan, I'm not from the South. So, there's a lot of different dynamics that I don't know about because I'm not from the South. But looking at the racial landscape, I do have to ask myself, and I always ask myself, who is speaking? If I were to go protest, would I be venting? And am I aware that my higher self, you understand, the part of me that is the creator aspect of who I am, you understand, has created all of these scenarios to grow me. So if I don't have that sort of frame of reference, which up-level gives, then I'm going to be venting without a container and without understanding that this is the pain of my animal and my ego. But my higher self knows all is well. Nothing is against me. All things serve to further. I create my life. I create my destiny. I am the centrifugal force, the center of my universe. So those things are not sort of weaved into the Black Lives Matter understanding. So I haven't been able to participate necessarily.
Wow, it's really fascinating. I really appreciate the distinction of, well, just the noticing. I think that we don't really anywhere in our culture take the time to, before we have a conversation or even in the midst of a conversation, step back, like bring that awareness and be like, which part of me is talking?
Right, exactly.
And why am I here? And why am I showing up for this? Right. I haven't thought about that at all in terms of race relations.
Right, well, because I'm a love coach, and I support people who are in relationships in having conversations, they always have to set a container and tell us who is speaking. If I'm going to complain that you're disrespecting me, I have to know that that is my ego speaking, because you're actually not disrespecting me. You're doing the best you can based on what you know. I'm doing the best I can based on what I know. And I'm having a feeling from my ego and my animal that you disrespected me. For instance, I told one of my white girlfriends, I said, can I vent? I asked her, I always set a container if I want to vent, because I know it's just my ego and my animal speaking, because my higher self knows that nothing is wrong and that all things serve to further. So I asked my white girlfriend the other day, I said, can I vent to you? Because she was in my kitchen making lasagna. And she said, yeah, you can vent to me. I said, thank you. This is just my ego and my animal speaking, right? That's point number one. You've done nothing wrong. That's point number two. And point number three, for safety, I'll tell her what level of emotion I'm at. I'm at a 10, I'm raging, or I'm at a 5, I'm okay. But at this moment, I was at an 8. And I told her, I said, okay, thank you for opening container and letting me vent, but you can't call me girl. I don't like when people of European descent say, hey girl, hey girlfriend, because girl was what my grandmother was called, right? In a setting wherein she was an elder woman in Detroit. She worked for a very wealthy family as their housekeeper, and she was called girl. And so we, women of African origin, took that term and we made it into a play on words. Hey girl, we were just like, reducing the impact of grandmothers being called girl by saying, hey girl, you know, what's up girl? Like we made it into a term of endearment. So in that way, I don't care for, my ego doesn't care to be called girl by women of European origin. And so she heard my vent and she said, well, thanks for sharing. How can I support you? That's a part of the up-level framework as well. So the up-level framework is a communication meant to reduce stress and to be authentic with each other and to set up a space where I can get that ego vent out of my body. Later, I will process that to the higher self, knowing that nobody's doing anything wrong. And that she just didn't know that that was a term that might be a term that is sticky for me. So do you understand the difference in a conversation wherein I just go out there and say, stop doing this to me. You're being disrespectful. I don't like you. You're being rude to me. That's not really the truth of the matter. The fact of the matter is that my ego has a concern and I need to be heard. But it doesn't have anything to do with anyone else.
It's so beautifully said, Kenya. And I think that this is a problem for all of us, like regardless of the color of our skin, right? Like there's not very much cultural preparation, education, awareness around how to have conversations about things that feel difficult. Like that example that you just gave is so beautiful, which I think most people wouldn't necessarily have the courage to name something like that, especially with a friend, you know, who, and the fact that we need to have these conversations, I think is really what you're getting at here.
Right. One of your speakers said last night that the reason, one of the underpinnings for addiction is that we can't show up authentically with each other, which causes stress. Right. So one of the things that my tool in the up-level book and the up-level framework does is allow us to show up as real people to each other and then support one another's ego until we can get back to the higher self.
It's so beautiful and so important. It's reminding me a lot of the work that we're doing at Seek, is specifically like the meetings that we hold and the interactions that we facilitate are around how do you have a conversation where you set a container first and then let whatever is happening really be and accept it for whatever it is, even if it's challenging, even if it creates emotional activation. Yeah, so maybe you can tell us a little bit more about like what the up-level framework looks like, or for those who might not know what we mean when we're saying, you know, setting a container before we start a conversation.
Yep. So the up-level framework reduces and ends all arguments. In my view, English is a language of war because it's solely based around the framework of the ego. If I have a feeling, it's my truth. It's just my feeling. You disrespected me. In this framework, in the up-level framework, your disrespecting me is never true. It is my perception based on my past experiences and what I've been through. For instance, I live in Asheville. It's very few people of African descent who are entrepreneurs and who live above the poverty line in Asheville. Let's face it. So I didn't know that when I moved here. And so I go to a very wealthy gym. They closed now because of COVID, but a very wealthy spin cycle, you know, place where people are spinning. And all of the women there are of European origin. And I was going through something where I felt left out. They would have parties. They wouldn't tell me. They were in Biltmore Forest and everybody was getting ready for a party at spin class. And I said, what's everybody doing? Oh, we have a party. Oh, I just had no idea. You know, I guess certain people are invited. I don't know. Anyways, the fact of the point that I'm making is that my perception of that had to do with things that I've been through in my teenage years. Going to Europe, I play the cello. I went to Europe with a 100-piece orchestra at age 15 with all persons of European origin. So I've been through experiences where I felt like the outsider. So that's going to become my pattern. That's going to become something I expect. And so I have to understand that in order to communicate my feelings about it. I can't blame or shame them unless I'm venting, step one. But when I get to step two, processing, I have to take ownership of that scenario. That's step three, ownership. And then step four, even get to gratitude. Thank you so much. This is so triggering. And I'm learning that I have to change my pattern. I'm learning that I have to expect something new. Okay. And so these can be challenging concepts, but the up-level framework has 4 steps. That's vent, be right up in your ego, right up in your animal, and say, be exactly where you are. Move to processing those emotions, move to ownership of those emotions, and move to gratitude on those emotions.
Simple. 4 clear steps. I think that's what's so beautiful about the tool, though, is that it's easy to bring to mind, to bring into consciousness in these moments that are heated, and we're like, all right, I need to vent. I need to vent. I know that that's true right now.
But just imagine how stressed out I'd be if I thought that all these people are doing things to me. Everybody hates me. The whole world is against me. How could I live my life? How would I not be addicted to things that help me feel more connected when I sense that level of disconnection? Unless I moved it to processing, ownership, and gratitude.
Absolutely. And here's where we see the illness of our whole culture showing up for everyone, in the spaces that we don't have for connection like that, where we're blocked by this kind of shame. Something that's coming up for me right now is I'm wondering, like, as you're describing this, and as a person of African descent yourself, it seems so like I'm experiencing like a lot of strength and beauty in recognizing this and making these choices around communication, and imagining too that in some ways it feels unfair, like if the burden of communication, or I know that that's something that's spoken a lot, right, and like surfaced a lot in this whole conversation around race this year, is the burden of should the burden of clear communication, be on folks who haven't had a voice or a chance to express for a long time. So I guess, yeah, the model that you're explaining clearly works for any human being. And do you have anything that you can share about, as far as people of European descent, like opening these kinds of conversations, or what feels safe and appropriate? And
well, for persons of European origin, it's really nice to know how to hold space, but persons of every origin have to know how to hold space. I had to be able to hold space with my friend's countervent. So when I vented and said, I don't like people calling me girl, of course she had a countervent about how she doesn't want that word taken away. That's a term of endearment that she has used for a long time, and she likes it. And why I have to say, don't say it, so that I have to be able to hold space for that. So when she vented, I said, well, thank you for sharing. How can I support you? And we have 6 or 7 supports that we use as standards to bring the ego down from a 10 to a 0. But we all have that onus to hold space for each other. When you talk about, well, people who haven't had this, is it my responsibility to open space with persons of European origin? If I'm triggered, then yes, it's my responsibility. I'm triggered. Everybody has the same amount of responsibility. The reason that I gave up on the concept of racism long ago in my 20s, and I'm 46 now, I gave up on that concept because I know every person on this planet has equal amount of pain, equal amount of pleasure, and equal amount of peace. I don't care how much damn money they have. All of my clients are very wealthy. They all have the same level of pain as a person who was not very wealthy. So I don't see, I understand everybody's idea that this setup is unfair. I can understand that from a perspective, and from another perspective, we are all creating this scenario together. So it's my responsibility, if I'm triggered, to vent and to open container and to make that known. And that's not a huge responsibility. It's just a human responsibility.
Yeah, human bodies born with emotions in them that course through them and move through them. It's our, not just our responsibility, but I think our the journey of life to work out how to navigate and feel and communicate those feelings to the people around me.
Yep.
You were saying something else earlier too about this framework, and you named the animal, the ego, and the higher self. Are those the three parts that you work the most with in this framework? Are there
Absolutely.
others? Yeah.
Yes, those are the three parts I really recognize. If you've ever seen the example of the monkey, speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil, or the monkey with three faces, that's a very old indigenous ideology that has to do with the three parts of our human consciousness. And so the animal is the part of us that's raw emotion. It doesn't even have a language. We feel, it's almost like we can grunt if we're angry, or we when we're sad, or whatever emotion we're going through is the animal. The animal houses all of our emotion. The ego is actually just our mouthpiece. So the ego can be speaking on behalf of the animal, but the ego is just expressing in language what we're feeling. Okay. The higher self has no language either. It's the part of us that we go to when we're sleeping. It's the part of us that runs 70 trillion cells in our body without our ego's help. If your ego had to run your heart, you'd be dead. If your ego had to run your synapses and your digestion, you would be gone off this planet. So the ego doesn't run anything. It's just a mouthpiece. The higher self runs those 70 trillion cells, and its nature is peace. Its nature is goodness. Everybody has this goodness. Okay, in the West, they call this your conscience, the voice of your conscience, right? And everybody has the animal. I feel like this today. I feel like this today. And so we have these three parts. And the West just haven't done the best job in helping us to organize these parts of ourselves so that they work together in harmony and with others.
And in the journey to working together in harmony is this practice. That's what you're saying, is this practice of identifying when I'm activated, learning how to speak to it, opening a container for speaking to it.
Yes, otherwise, if I believe what my ego and my animal are saying is true, then it's always just going to be us fighting. Well, I don't like that you did this. I don't like that you said this. I don't like that you try to keep certain people poor and put certain people rich and make this capitalism. I don't like it. You're wrong. It's wrong. That doesn't do anything for me or you. You can come back with the same thing. Well, I don't like it either. I don't like this feeling of guilt. I don't want to always think about this inequality or privilege. Okay, that's an ego debate that we're having. But what is the voice of the higher self saying about it? You have to understand that we are warriors to be born in the United States of America, because countries where there is homogeny, racial homogeny, like Denmark, these are the happiest countries in the world. Finland, okay, where there's not a huge diversity to contend with. If you're born as a spirit in the United States of America, you are a road warrior. You are here to work out some intense stuff this lifetime. And so, there's no homogeny here. So we have to figure out a way to get to our higher self in the midst of all of our ego, ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and feelings.
Wow. That's beautifully said. That's beautifully said. I'm really resonating right now with this idea of being warriors, and peacemakers in a way, if we're engaging this higher self in the kinds of conversations that you're talking about. It's how do we move forward and have and in not just in celebration of our differences, but in celebration of shared humanity, really, of the fact that we have animals and we have emotion, and we can show up and fully express that without pushing each other away.
Sure. I would love that. Now, how to integrate that into our movements, into our piece where we're out in the street with our signs and we're venting. If I'm at a Black Lives Matter rally, I am venting, because the truth of the higher self is that all these things are here to serve me. All these experiences are here to grow me. All these experiences are here to show me my power. But that's at a level that we don't take to the streets. We take to the streets with our animals and our egos. That's fine. All I'm asking is, can we add in the higher self? Can we get to processing some of this stuff so that we can bring solutions in from the higher self? The higher self knows how to harmonize all things and all beings, just like it harmonizes 70 trillion cells.
But then it's complicated because we have groups of people. It's not like individual humans that can set the container and, name that venting is happening and move through it in this process. It's whole groups of people who are in like very serious trauma activated places, and it almost seems like there's not an opportunity for those kinds. So would you say that I think what I'm getting from you is that from the bigger picture of racial healing in this country, it's going to be happening more in individual conversations than in a larger.
Absolutely, but also through osmosis. We've heard of the theory of the 100th monkey, where monkeys on an island didn't know how to open a particular fruit. But once one monkey on this side of the island understood how to open it, through osmosis, monkeys on all of the rest of the places on the island started to know how to open that fruit. So we can say that these are individual conversations, but it will amass to a network of healing. That's what it's already doing.
Yeah, it's true, right? And we're all starting to understand more about this this different way of being in communication and with our emotions. I know this conference this weekend is kind of evidence of that.
Absolutely.
I'm like wanting to track back to something you said a couple minutes ago about how you left the concept of racism behind a while ago, and I was just even aware as you said that, oh, that's a edgy thing to say, especially in the world that we're living in today. And I guess I'm wondering like what you mean by that specifically, because my understanding, at least of all this learning that I've been doing this year as well, is around how that concept is simply pointing us towards a reality that we're all participating in, regardless of the color of our skin, that the way that society has evolved is such that we have found through our evolution reasons to put some people down and raise other people up for power, for profit, and that systemic racism consistently, from back in the early days of this country, separating the lower classes by race simply to create more mechanisms for control, is something that kind of just got into the DNA of our culture. So I understand that, and it makes me very curious about what you mean as a concept or as a word. I guess I'm curious which one you're wanting to throw out.
Well, I throw out both concepts because number one, the concept of race is not real. I mean, all of us coming from various hues doesn't make us different, different race. That race does not exist, as your speaker said last night. However, I believe that people from different cultural origins have different talents. So if you look at people and try to understand the elements, let's say earth, fire, water, air, I do believe that persons of African cultural origin have a watery quality. We can watery, we're watery. We can go into spirit. We can move. We can hear sound. We can do certain things that are watery talents. In my view, persons of European origin have fiery talents. They deal with electricity, technology, making bigger things, doing different things with that talent. And then persons of maybe indigenous origin are more earthy. Even their height is shorter to the ground, and they deal with a lot of family stuff and earthy stuff that coagulates and makes big social unions. So I believe that different cultures have different talents, but I don't believe in the concept of race. But I believe those cultures and those different talents all work together. And that's the warrior quality we have if we're born in this country, to see how we can all learn from each other and work together. We have to acknowledge one of my vents, when I vent about quote unquote race, I say, hey, this is my ego speaking. Nobody's doing anything wrong. But excuse me, y'all have stuff to learn from persons of African origin. We have a sensuality. We have an ability to connect to spirit that y'all need to have. It's even evidence in y'all language where, you're speaking on an ego level all the time. What about emotion? What about sensuality? What about pleasure? What about spirit? That's missing, you see, in the fiery traditions. So that's how I see this. Now, I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else.
That makes so much sense, but I'm loving the frame because it's just like leaving me with this like rich, juicy sense of how all the different types and shapes and forms of humans on this planet kind of add up to this overall picture of represented by the elements or represented by, any measure of diversity that we could point to right now that we there are differences and uniquenesses that are brought
Right.
by our
But
different
Jennifer,
culture.
just look at fire and water and you understand why Apple got started based on Aretha Franklin. There's no need for an iPod. There's no need for a sound system like this that's built with fire and technology without the water coming through those speakers of Aretha Franklin, baby. There wouldn't be invented without each other. So you have to look at how these things can come together and how they have come together and start to appreciate all of that. I was watching my sons play Fortnite, the video game, the other day. On Fortnite, the characters are dancing. They're doing all type of hip hop dance out the street. There's no reason for Fortnite. The kids wouldn't watch it without that water, without that spirit that's coming through those dances and those songs. But then we couldn't see it on the television without the fire of that technology. So when you look at that marriage, there could be a million such marriages. We just have to get there. I always wonder, what's everybody talking about? Will we feel the guilt? Will we feel the unfairness? Will we feel this? When are we going to look at what we've created here and appreciate each element that has created it and see all those elements as equal in value, not the same, but equal in value?
It gets me excited about what is coming, what will be co-created in the future, and not just from a more peaceful communities and less conflict perspective, but also technology, to your point, and art and the things that are created by blending the talents and skills of one human from with another.
Incredible. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I'm really appreciating about what you're saying is you're saying in so many words that that this idea of race is a construct, in the same way that gender is a construct, by saying it's not. And here, this is really where my language, I'm a linguistics background, and so my linguistic nerd side is really coming out here. And this is keeps coming up for me when we talk about race this year, is it's the words that we're using that tend to invoke or incite certain responses. And as we're saying, you're articulating so beautifully that there's not an actual difference between our experience of being alive and being human and experiencing emotion, and there are these functional differences. But the way that racism has evolved in Western culture is this construct, just like gender. It's not real, but it's a thing that it affects all of us because of the way that we enroll into it and buy into it, and then let it affect decision making, or let it prohibit conversations from happening. And I guess from that perspective, do you think that there's still a way of, or would you choose different language to point to this idea that we're talking about? If it doesn't feel right to call it racism, what language could we choose to speak about this very real constructed thing that's happening, maybe without using a word that's so provocative?
Oh, it's just lack of connection. It's it's the essence of addiction. It's lack of connection. If I don't understand that I'm one with all things and beings, then I'm a dead man walking. And that is everyone. So when I think of racism, sometimes I think of, people thinking it's affecting persons of African origin. Right? What you're talking about is an illness and a lack of connection to one another and the earth. That's a problem for everybody. Sometimes my issue with racism is, oh my gosh, well, we need to help this person's. Baby, you need to help yourself, because you're involved in an illness that is going to cause just as much physical, mental, and spiritual damage to you as anyone else. I did a post on my Facebook page that said, persons of European origin need to understand they were equally affected by slavery as Black people. Okay, it is an illness that you inherit when you are in a scenario like that. The cruelty, either that you were sitting sipping lemonade on the porch as a white woman, or you were inflicting this pain as a white man, or you were receiving this pain as a person of African origin. Okay, you were equally damaged by this wetiko this lack of connection. That's a Wetiko is a word from Native American language that just means lack of connection to others and self and the earth.
Watiko?
Wetiko, Wetiko.
Hmm.
That's what we're experiencing, and it's affected everyone equally. You're talking about, oh my gosh, these policemen are killing persons of African origin. These policemen are ill from Wetiko. The same way that persons in the projects with not enough money are ill from Wetiko. It causes violence, causes you to abuse your own people. It causes you to abuse yourself. That is a total illness of society. And so that's how I like to see it, rather than, oh my gosh, somebody's doing something to me. I'm affected by the illness, you affected by the illness equally.
I think this is such an important point that needs talked about more, is that the racism is something that affects all of us. When we talk about being anti-racist, we're not talking about creating more guilt. We're talking about looking at this illness that we are all experiencing and choosing to take a stand, choosing to communicate in a different way, choosing to be real about what our animal is saying and notice what the higher self wants to say, and engage in communication that is actually healing this experience of Watiko, which I very much appreciate. But what tradition does that come from? Do you know?
I have no idea. It's from a Native American tradition. I just saw it in an article one day and it stuck.
Beautiful. Okay, well, that brings me to just wondering what are your thoughts on how we can more actively be engaging or creating spaces for emotional awareness, I guess, either within the explicit realm of race relations or just, in individual communities and cultures,
Sure, yeah.
or even what the work you're doing, getting up level out there. How is that? What do you see?
Absolutely. Connie's on this call, and Connie and myself are running a group called Asheville Model City for Race Relations. And so we're going to be bringing people together to start to have these conversations where we can cleanse out the subconscious mind. Okay, the subconscious is what's holding all these constructs in place. So we can do all the outreach we want to, but if we're not allowing the animal to speak and release this tension, then we're not really getting anywhere in terms of healing inflammation, healing disconnection, or healing ourselves of these issues. Okay, that policeman who did what he did with the Floyd case, he needs to come out and vent. I wish that white men would vent. You understand? And really talk about their pain. I wish that persons of African descent would vent. I wish that women of European origin would vent, because I feel like women of European origin have a lot to vent about. And see, it's almost like we're saying, well, the Blacks are in pain, so they should just vent, and we will just sit and take it. I don't think that's a solution. I think everybody needs to vent. Everybody needs to process those emotions, take ownership, and so that we can create these new solutions in gratitude.
And what would you say about, because I think it's really challenging, right? I love what you're saying, Kenya, because you're right. If one person shares a truth that's difficult to share, if they vent, and I think the next part of that is it's hard to not take that personally, especially if it's in the if it's not personally directed, but there's a way in which I could pretty easily take it personally. So do you have any tips and tricks for what I'm imagining is counterventing here, right? We have two people in the room who have really different experiences, and we're able to at least step into, okay, I'm going to vent, and that's the container and the context for this. I don't know, anything you can say about maybe a facilitator holding the space for those, back-to-back venting to happen, or?
Well, yes, it's not really back-to-back venting. So my framework says that if a person has asked and set container and you're holding space, you have to let them vent and then give them the 7 soothings until they're down to a 0. Once they're down to a 0, then you countervent. You never countervent while somebody's still up, be over a 0. So we could practice it now if somebody wanted to have a open and authentic share that would support me in releasing this pain and then coming down to a 0, then I could hear that person's vent. And then we would move into processing.
Sure. Is there anybody, I'm going to put this back in gallery view because I can't see everybody right now. But is anybody interested in a demo? Anyone have anything to vent about?
And I could start the vent, and then maybe that person could counter vent. And, you know, as raw as you can. I'm very used to being raw with my emotions, which is what's missing in the West. And that, therefore, I'm always clearing my energy field of this gunk. I mean, we have to go to the bathroom every day or else you die. Okay, if we're not venting this stuff out in a safe container and processing that emotion, we're the walking dead.
Well, I don't see anybody jumping for it, but I'm happy to hold space, or, you know, see if that moves into, I don't have anything particularly big and alive for me right now. Well, no, that's not true. Of course, I'm sure I have something alive if I sit still here and think about it. But would you like to do it, the two of us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll try it out. See what everyone thinks. And maybe somebody might get some boldness to go. But I consider this to be a ritual, you know, another thing that is missing in the West. You know, that's what I'll vent about, okay? So I got my vent. All right, so I always have something to vent about. So I'll start by asking you, Jennifer, will you hold space for a vent?
Yeah, I'd be honored to. Thanks for asking, Kenya.
Nobody's doing anything wrong. Nobody's doing anything to me. This is just my ego speaking on behalf of my animal.
All right.
I'm about at a level 6 on this vent. All right. Yeah, that's my vent. I really don't appreciate, you know, Jennifer, I don't appreciate a culture wherein we cannot acknowledge everybody's talents. Like, what the fuck? You guys don't see Black women falling out in church? You don't understand the power of this person, this human of African origin who is a woman, and her power to connect to the spirit world? Y'all just want to look at it and think it's some form of entertainment. Nobody's going to capitalize on that and say, hey, what are you learning? How are you going there? How are you able to do this? Like, you know, you just want to go into African cultures, and you know that Europeans have gone into African cultures and just said, oh, these are heathens. We don't know what they're doing. But these people have a dope-ass psychology, a dope-ass culture that does not separate people, that brings people together. You don't want to study that. You don't want to acknowledge that. You don't want to make that a part of your educational problem with bullying, as someone mentioned, disconnection, people walking into schools, shooting up kids. You don't want no part of cultures that know how to raise humans. You don't want to learn nothing from that. From these people who have withstood all this pain for 400 years and are joyful, you don't want to learn from that. You have nothing to say. You just what? You just what? Want to put it on a Wendy's commercial, our language. Oh yeah, that's dope. Oh yeah, you just want to take tidbits of it. You don't want to acknowledge the power of this culture. Really? The fortitude. Really? That's my vent.
Thank you.
Now, after I would vent, you would say, thank you for sharing. How can I support you? This is a framework. So there's really a script. So would you be willing to say, thank you for sharing? How can I support you?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Kenya. How can I support you right now?
All right. The 7 supports that I give in my up-level book are empathy, reassurance, simulation, open-ended questions, and so forth. So I get to ask for whatever I want. And right now, I would like a simulation. That simply means that I want to hear specific words from you. And I'll tell you what those words are.
Okay, I'd love to hear.
I would like for you to simulate saying that I'm right, and that persons of European origin should really be open to learning from persons of African origin, just like we have to learn from y'all and go to y'all colleges and y'all institutions and all of that. It should be the same thing where there are institutions to learn what we are, just like we go to your institutions to learn who you are.
All right. Yeah, Kenya, you were really right. People of European descent are really missing the opportunity to learn from the richness of culture of folks of African descent. And while there's this, kind of a mandated learning of people of African descent from people of European descent, there's been this huge gap of learning in the other direction. And we really need to be taking more steps to integrating that richness into culture as a whole.
Thank you for sharing. Now, the framework says you would ask me, what level does that take me down to?
So what level does that take you down to now? You said you were at a 6 before.
That takes me down to a 3. May I ask for something more?
Sure.
Would you be willing to empathize with not having your talents recognized and not having it be such that your force is your life force and your life essence seems just as important as everybody else's?
Yeah. Yeah, that part really stood out to me about what you were saying. This experience of not being appreciated, not being seen for the talents that um, like you bring individually and then culturally too, like what's a part of heritage isn't being appreciated or seen, or it's really just being commodified and capitalized, taken for profit rather than being appreciated. And I don't know if I can relate. Yeah, I can relate to that very specifically in my experience being a woman, and having my sexuality objectified in situations that I've experienced throughout my life, where the wholeness of me wasn't appreciated and seen and understood. So I'm sure it's different, but I can really relate to that.
Thank you for sharing. And you would ask me, does that take me down at all?
And does that take you down any further?
Oh, that takes me down. That brought forth some tears, and it takes me down to a level 1. And then if I'm not at a 0, you would say, how else can I support you?
How else can I support us right now?
And I will ask that you be willing to listen to a short, authentic share about this very conference that I went through.
I would love to hear that.
I posted a link to this conference on the Nextdoor app, and I posted a picture of myself and said, come listen to the lecture tomorrow. And I didn't get any comments. It was on the Nextdoor Asheville app, except one comment that said, this picture is not professional. It doesn't make you look like a speaker. I can't tell that you're a speaker based on this picture. You should use a different picture. And I was like, what does this have to do with the picture? I'm inviting them to this conference to hear the talk, and just somebody policing how I look in the picture as the only comment was very disheartening. And that's just something my ego picked up, an authentic share. All I need for you to say is that you understand, and maybe some reassurance that you understand how challenging that must have felt.
Yeah, I understand. I'm imagining what it was like to receive that comment, and I just get that was probably really challenging.
Thank you. And you would ask, what level does it take me down to?
What level does that bring you down to now?
It brings me down to a 0. Thank you for holding space.
Yeah, thank you, Kenya.
I'm open to hearing any counter vent you might have, or anything that triggered you about my vent.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really wanting to. Yeah, I wanted to do this both ways. I'm just integrating a lot right now about your framework. So just to like go kind of meta about what we just experienced.
So you would set container by letting me know that who is speaking. Is it your ego, your animal, or your higher self? And you would tell me what level you're at, and of course, take me off the hook. I'm not doing anything wrong. And it's just your ego speaking.
Okay, for me to move into my event.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because I'm aware that I have some like impact of the process that we just did, but I guess we can wait to talk about that until after. Is that?
It's up to you. I would love to hear your impact first or after.
Yeah, I kind of want to share it now, and then I can share my event if you're open to that.
I am.
My whole body resonates so deeply with this methodology, Kenya. It's woven into a different expression of the methodology that I spent several years now, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, creating a structure for in the company, the nonprofit that I started that's hosting this festival this weekend, and our own process for doing exactly kind of what we just went through. So I'm struck by the humanity of it. And what I'm really taking away from this process and how it's different from the ritual that I'm used to is the agency around what do you need right now. So in my way of doing this and my cultural rituals around it, hmm, there's a feeling of, usually we just kind of immediately step into holding space, like those 7 supports that you named. We would immediately go into a curious question or a reflection or sharing impact. But I'm just really loving and appreciating this moment for consent of, before any of that, thank you. What do you need right now? And maybe offering one of those 7 options, but asking that before moving right in. I feel like there's a learning happening in me with that.
Awesome.
I noticed some emotion moving through you.
Always. I love emotion so much. I'm always there. That's when ladies are doing like this. That's emotion. I'm always open there, without having a drink. I noticed my girlfriends in high school and college who are of European origin need to have a drink before they can be in that space. This is a space I'm in all day, and this is what I would love to share of how to be there. It's the feminine incorporated with masculinity,
Mm. Thank you. We're always feeling, we're always moving. Okay, may I share event as well? Are you open to that?
Very open, Jennifer. Yes, I am.
All right. I guess remind me if I'm deviating from because it's new to me, the structure. So please remind me if I'm deviating. Is there anything else that I need to name with the container before I start?
Sure. Tell me who's speaking and let me know what level you're at.
Okay. It feels edgy, but I'm just this will be my ego speaking. And I'm at, probably a 6 or 7 with this share. I feel my heart beating fast. A part of this conversation, like part of what it's bringing up for me that feels activating is this feeling that I have a lot of the time that I'm doing something wrong. And it's happened a lot with even just the work that I've been doing in the organization that I'm a part of, as an organization that is predominantly folks of European descent. I'm of Latin origin, mixed Latin origin, and European descent myself. But most of us are European descent, and I have known the truth of what we're talking about here today, and understood how holding space for each other and learning how to do that can create this healing we're talking about, from a racial perspective. And I have this like deep desire to help perpetuate those conversations and to get them happening more in our world. And I felt really like as I've tried to do that, both as a leader and in my personal life, like come up against like, oh, you're, as a white person, you're not allowed to do that, or, be quiet, or you're not being considerate enough, or there's, something, and it almost feels like there's, it's a kind of a feeling of not being able to do anything right, even though what I want is healing and wellness and space for everyone to be able to speak whatever's on her heart or whatever's on their heart. And sometimes I feel, in this moment, I feel like it's frustrated, but then that frustration like turns inward on me, and it tells me that like I'm not doing good enough, and that I just really should keep my head down and not be a part of conversations I'm not invited to. And it just, it kills me. It takes away my power. It feels, makes me feel small. It makes me feel small.
Thank you so much for sharing. How can I support you? Choose empathy, reassurance, simulation, open-ended questions, touch.
Of those, questions, or reassurance, either of those would feel really good.
Sure. Would you like to ask me a question, or do you want me to ask you a question about what you said?
I'd love for you to ask me a question.
Okay. When you are told that you shouldn't be in certain conversations and that you should just butt out, what is your immediate reaction and how do you respond?
Well, there's an example that I'm thinking of right now, which wasn't that I shouldn't be in the conversation. It was that, the way that I hold space, or, if I refer to a certain methodology or ritual, is going to push somebody else away, especially push people of African descent away. And that I just need to, I don't know, there wasn't like anything given. There wasn't so you should, it was just don't do that. And so I think my immediate feeling, you asked me, what is that like?
How did you respond?
How did I respond? I asked questions, trying to understand more about what it was that I did, but really I just got angry, and I didn't feel like there was any space to express my anger, really, until now, until this moment.
Thank you for sharing. Does that support you at all? And what level does it take you down to?
That really supports me. I think that's bringing me down to like a 4.
How else can I support you?
I would love to receive some reassurance.
Sure. What would you like to be reassured of?
That I'm not small, and that my participation in this conversation is important and valued and helpful.
Yes, Jennifer, baby, you are not small. We need your voice. We need your effort. We need your energy, your entire life force, and your entire essence, and your entire talent is something that we all, and I'm talking about 7.7 billion people, we need it. You are not small. I just want to reassure you of that. I see you. Does that support you at all? And if so, what level does it bring you down to?
Supports me deeply. I feel I'm down here by a 1 or a 0.
Thank you. How else can I support you?
If we were in person, I would probably ask for touch.
There you go. So we ask, how else can I support you, until the person's down to a 0. That could take an hour. This is what people in the village used to do before work and money was a top priority. We listen to each other, talk all day, process emotion. This is the important thing to do in life. This is how we elongate life and heal, and this is medicine. So if you were really in a circle with us, we would take you all day. And if you get down to a 0 2 hours later, that's just what it took. And then, and only then, do we move people to processing. I can't tell you, well, Jennifer, you create your life. Nobody's doing anything to you. I can't inculcate higher self principle if you are in ego venting. If you in ego venting, I'm agreeing with you. I'm empathizing with you. I'm reassuring you. I'm asking you more about your question. I'm asking you about your pain. I'm asking you until you're down to a 0 and feel totally heard, seen, and met. Then and only then can I take you to the next level, which is, Jennifer, how are you creating this? And And only when you know how you're creating it can you uncreate it, create something new. So I asked myself at step 2, how am I creating feeling unseen by an entire culture? Why am I creating that?
Mm.
And that's the step that people, that's the difference between complaining and venting. Venting in the up level system is acknowledging that this is my ego and I'm about to change this story at processing. Because I create my life.
Mm.
I am powerful enough, intelligent enough, creative enough to change this trigger, to remove this trigger. But not until I get angry and vent it out. Until then, it's stuck inside of me. And that's where the West is. Stuck, stuck, stuck. White men are not coming flat out and venting. I'm afraid of fucking black men. I'm afraid of them. I think they have a big dick. I think they're gonna take our men. I think we're gonna be eradicated. Say it. Or else you're gonna keep killing them. Because you're not letting the fear be seen. Same with white women. I am actually afraid of white men. I've never sanctioned what they did. And I am riddled with guilt to be a part of it, a beneficiary. Say it. Or I am that lady who said on my picture, oh, this picture isn't right. She needs to come out and say, I'm intimidated by the sexuality of Black women. It's off-putting. I don't know how to process it when I see it. I don't know how to look directly at it. Say it, vent, so that you can process this stuff and see how you're creating it, see where it came from, see where it resides in your cellular memory. It's messing up your genetics.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Wow, there's something even just about hearing you name it like on behalf of the collective that I'm experiencing is really powerful right now in this moment.
As long as you keep holding it in, you're gonna repeat the experience.
That's true. That's true. And we know that on an individual level. It is, of course, true on a collective level. Wow. I wasn't anticipating the healing that I'm experiencing in my own being right now, Kenya. I thank you.
Yeah. Well, we need you. I just need you to keep going. What else do you want to chat about with this? This, in my view, I mean, I do this with my children. I do this with my husbands. I do this with everybody I know. I taught my parents, my grandparents. You know, I do this with all of my friends of European origin. Jesse can tell you that. Connie can tell you that. They're my friends. This is how I roll. I want to be around people who are spreading this kind of authenticity because it's the only thing that relieves the stress of racism on all of us. Stress is what's inflaming us and killing us.
Yeah. In the SeekHealing framework, the parallel terminology we have for it is this idea of rule 0, that if something is difficult to say, if it's challenging, if I'm worried it's going to upset the other person, then we have to find a way to say it and hold space for each other to say it. It's a powerful core truth, core part of being alive in a human body. Well, we're just coming up to the end, actually. We have a couple extra minutes we can probably squeeze in here. I'm actually just wondering if there's any questions from everybody who's been in here with us. I'm just going to kind of scroll back through the chat. Or if you have a question, you can feel free to unmute and just jump right in. Anybody have a question for Kenya? I'm going to put this back on gallery view.
What I want to say about this framework is that it's very indigenous. And this is the very thing that a lot of people fear when you talk about, I've lived in many neighborhoods. I grew up in an all Jewish neighborhood, and my family integrated the Jewish neighborhood. And then of course, all the Jewish people started moving out. But the ideology there is that the culture of persons of African descent is so different. It's so loud, it's so emotional based, it's so this, it's so that. But it's exactly what's needed to balance out the culture of the fire people. It's a culture of water. So that is a great balance. Water and fire work together, just with earth and wood and all the other elements. They work together. But this, in my view, is not seen in nonviolent communication. It's not seen in creative conversations. There's a few frameworks, and none of them let you vent. None of them let you speak from the animal, but then you're still clogged.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So learn from a Black woman who talked. We've been known, oh, they're angry. Oh, they did this and that. Oh, we're going to let it out. All I advise is utilizing a container. Mm-hmm. But if you don't do that, I'm telling you, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be joyless.
Yeah. One of my takeaways, I think, from this conversation is just something I already know to be true, that, any expression of emotion, however it's coming through, needs honored and needs recognize the wisdom in that. And really just the importance of creating even more permission for that, for people to really emote in whatever way is biggest and loudest and truest, that we don't take it personally, but that we stay with it with each other.
Absolutely. I've heard that book. I don't know how they made $1 million off telling people the 4 agreements. Don't take it personal. Okay, they don't have a ritual to get you to learn how to not take it personal. My clients and my customers and my members, we go through this every day. Let somebody vent about you. Just sit there, hold space. That's how you learn. You can't just tell people, don't take it personal. I don't know how they made $1 million telling people to do that. You have to provide a safe space for people to learn how to not take it personal. Okay, this is a framework for that. If you want to get beyond intellectualizing, not taking it personal, and actualize that, try my framework.
You have to practice it. Wow, great, Kenya. Well, I'm looking forward to having you around SeekHealing more, and integrating this practice more into the work that we're already doing. And I'm just so grateful for this conversation, and for our time here together today. I think if Joey is here, he's probably gonna close us out. Oh, there's a couple questions in here.
Yeah, somebody's asking how to assess willingness to hear impact. How to assess. Well, oh, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Well, in my framework in the Up-Level book, you always have to ask permission to vent. You cannot just simply walk up to somebody, vent. That's why I don't go out in the street and protest. Who am I speaking to? Who's speaking? Am I going to process this vent? Am I going to do something about this trigger? Am I going to change my entire reality based on this vent? Or am I going to sit and stew in it? So you have to assess willingness. You ask, can I vent? I'm at a 10. Can you hear a level 10 vent? It's about you. It's just a lie of my ego, but can you hear it? A lie.
And potentially coming back if the answer is no in this moment, but creating another space to...
If the answer is no, go somewhere else. My husband tells me all the time, no, I don't want to hear your vent right now. Go vent to this person. Go vent to your friend. Go vent out there to the tree. And in Africa, there's a ritual where you even do this venting process sitting back to back, so that you're venting out to the forest and they're venting out to the forest, and you vent at the exact same time. This was in Malidoma Some's book. This is a brilliant culture, African indigenous culture. These people had psychology out of this world. And that is what I wove into the Up-Level communication system.